Thank you for joining us for our next installment of our small group study. Chad, would you go ahead and read for us?
Yeah, 1 John 3, verse 1. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. And so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure.
Most people, when they read the book of First John or any of the epistles of John, I think they come away with it with this idea of it's a book about love. It's kind of, you can imagine maybe John, as he's writing this, maybe he's in a Volkswagen van. He's got a tie-dye shirt on. Is that an accurate kind of maybe idea about the book?
Yeah, I see John on the Isle of Patmos in a
Yes.
VW van. Yeah. No, obviously, it is not such a haphazard view of love, and it's a love that contains a call to purity and a call to obedience.
Okay. What I find interesting, or one of the things I find interesting about the books, is that we have this view of them as being very loving books and really oriented around this idea of well, really two ideas, love and light, but those seem to be very esoteric and not real concrete. And yet, what's fascinating to me, or one of the things that's fascinating, is that these books come out of a lot of conflict. It seems like the occasion for writing these was the leaving of a certain group of people from the church, and then their destructive and kind of contrary behavior after they left. They seem to be going around and causing a lot of trouble. And John's writing to the churches that he's involved in, trying to kind of mitigate the disaster that's kind of unfolding there. But I think for the casual reader, he wouldn't get that impression from reading this. So why do you think that John decides to deal with this conflict in the way that he does?
I guess he could approach it the same way, Paul does with the Galatians or something like that, but he goes for a different appeal, and I think it's a little different sort of problem as well. But there's a different appeal here, and it's a call to obedience, but through love, and it talks about so great a love that's been bestowed on us that we're called children, and talks about forgiveness over and again, and he could just say, hey, you're sinning, stop it, but he really is giving the greatest appeal he can for why we should stop, or at least why, in this case, his readers should stop.
Towards the beginning of the book, John seems to orient his argument around this image of light. And I think that for us, we have a vague notion about what that means. But looking at the Bible and how it uses this image of light, what is John really trying to get at with this argument?
Obviously we can pit light against darkness, and I think these themes still hold true for us even in secular culture today, where there's some goodness associated with light and some evil associated with the darkness, and I think it's kind of run in there, and it's not quite the same theme here, but obviously we get in Genesis, in the beginning, God creates light as one of his first things in creation, but we also get in John chapter 1 of his gospel that he talks about Jesus, and in him was his life was the light of men, or something along those lines, and it's this light that goodness is somehow directly linked to.
There seems to be something in the contrast between light and darkness of kind of being or existence and its lack. I mean, if you look at, as you pointed out, creation, or John 1, or even from a kind of scientific perspective, darkness is nothingness, and light is kind of that primary existence. It's kind of the first thing. It's kind of existence on its lowest plane or lowest complexity, if you will. What's being communicated by this contrast of light and darkness?
With it being focused on existence, it's kind of the idea of being what God created you to be, and living in the light. of what God created you to be. You can choose to be otherwise, than what God has created us for. But then you're kind of fading away into the darkness and into kind of non-existence.
I think that there's a number of writers, including C.S. Lewis, who have kind of used this idea of the being of goodness and kind of the nothingness of evil. How should we understand that as modern people?
The allusion to C.S. Lewis, his story where the certain things are very solid and other things are more ethereal and things of this sort, the good versus the evil, if you will. But as far as moderns, how are we to understand this? I think it's just a reminder that we can't reduce things down to just the physical, and there's a spiritual that governs both of them, and how solid something isn't even primarily a matter of its physicality, but more of its spirituality.
Yeah, in The Great Divorce, Lewis has his characters go from hell to heaven, kind of a little day trip. And the characters, when they get to heaven, they're ghost-like, and some of them are pretty embarrassed by their ghost-like appearance, and they find that they can't even bend a blade of grass, which makes walking on the grass torturous. There's something that Lewis is trying to communicate in that image about the nature of good versus evil, and I think that it's something that we don't often take into consideration. So, what is it that he's primarily trying to get at with that image?
I guess it's really the idea of being fully alive, and one of the oldest creeds is, that the glory of God is man fully alive. To have substance, to have weight to you and things of this sort, is something that's only associated with kind of walking as God created you to be and having the glory associated with that. Anything less than that is going to be less substantial.
It's interesting in the scripture that light and glory are associated with each other, and glory we would associate light with lightness, a lack of weightiness, and yet glory is associating light with heaviness. And I think all of these ideas kind of get back to the same thing, which is that there's a reality to goodness, and there's a lack of reality to evil. And that doesn't, I think, correspond to most of our experiences in the modern world as modern people. Evil seems to be the thing that has more truth to it, has more weight to it. One thing that you can say about suffering is it's real. There's no arguing with it. And so I think that's reminiscent, or that speaks to our modern ideas about the weight of evil. Why would the Bible be portraying evil as something that in essence is in a sense not real?
We have a creation here that hasn't always existed, and I realize time came with it. We can get into paradox here, but God is the ultimate reality, and He's existed for all of eternity, and there is no evil, there is no lack. It is pure goodness. And so when He creates creation, though, he sows His goodness into it, but He also, there's a provision for the lack of Him, if you will, in some weird way. And that's what evil is. It's just a lack of God's presence, a lack of God's glory in the world. But again, at the foundation of all reality is pure goodness.